Jangan lupa like, share, komen, dan subscribe Anda sangat berarti bagi kami untuk menambah semangat membuat konten yang lebih bermanfaat.
By the way, lots of Chinese people weren't happy with the 2 term limits, and they took to Weibo and other online forums, and they were not allowed to. In fact, the Chinese government disallowed the words personality cult, my emperor, 2 term limit, emperor Xi. They were all not allowed to use those words online to avoid people's dissatisfaction with this move.
It's just, you read Weibo?
I don't read Weibo, but others who read it for me.
Okay. Now, there are comments, there are views and comments describing their views and comments on this issue.
They got shut down.
It's not true. It got shut down because I wrote something on this as well.
Well, you wrote something critical of President Xi on Weibo.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. What did you write?
I said, this would not be regarded well by the Western press.
That's your definition of a criticism of the Chinese president. Nicely done, Charles. We've got to move on. Time is short. We want to talk about the economy in part 2. Before we do, there's another big domestic issue that's grabbed a lot of headlines in recent months. Your country, the government you support and have advised, according to a UN rapporteur, according to the US State Department, according to Amnesty International, according to Human Rights Watch, according to plenty of journalists, and many others, are believed to have detained maybe 1 million people or more, mainly from the Uighur Muslim ethnic minority, in re-education camps. 1 million people, Charles.
Okay.
1 million.
Okay. It's certainly not grabbing headlines in China.
Isn't that because you don't have a free press in China, so you can't have headlines about the Uyghurs?
No, it's because there are 55 national minorities in China, and Uyghurs' population is, in total,
9 and 10 million, I believe, in Xinjiang.
Yes, 0.7%
Okay, but the world doesn't work on percentages. If you lock up 1 million people...
деген жеріне отырасың, жөткөлген жеріне мына жатаққа жат десе жатасың. Жарым сағат тип болу да. Сонда 2-ден 2-ақ минут 50 әйелді жарым сағат ішінде отырып болу амал болса. Уақыт жетпейді, тез бол дейді. Адам мынаған келгенше басыма төк таяқтан ұрған. Сол сөйтіп шыққанға жарай басымызға төк таяқты жегенде, рахмет мұғалім, ендігі жол кешікпей отырам деп айтамыз.
Students should have a fixed bed position, fixed queue position, fixed classroom seat, and fixed station during skills work.
The world doesn't.
The world pays attention.
1.4 billion people need to be fed, need to be clothed,
That got to
need to
lock
be
up 1 million
educated.
people in Xinjiang. That must concern you to hear that 1 million people of your fellow Chinese countrymen and women have been locked
If
up
it's
by your
true,
government.
sure.
How do we establish if it's true or not? Why don't you let people in to check and count? Then we'll know for sure.
I think people have visited.
No, they've been on kind of supervised trips with Chinese monitors to select camps where they haven't been able to see everything. In fact, Reuters went on a trip last year. They were taken around, they were allowed to meet some people, and the people sang, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And Chinese government monitors stood in the room the whole time, and no one was allowed to speak to anyone independently.
well,
you know, Charles, that there are people who've been in those camps, who have come out of those camps, are now refugees in the US, in Kazakhstan, and they have testified to hooding, shackling, torture, sleep deprivation, sexual humiliation, starvation. This is what's coming out from people who've been in those camps in Xinjiang.
If it's true, then they're certainly very bad. This is not my area of expertise, and I'm not involved in the politics, and I've never been to Xinjiang. I'm more concerned about the economic side.
But let me bring in Victor Gao, who is a very well-known Chinese political commentator. Even Chinese government officials have admitted that there are these camps, there are people locked up for quote-unquote re-education, but in the most horrific conditions, and we're talking up to 1 million people, Victor. How can you justify that?
The Uighur people are our brothers and sisters. I have many friends among the Uighur people. Among the Muslim people in China, they are a minority. Most of them are great Chinese nationals, that's for sure. However, among the Uighur Muslims, there are extremists, there are terrorists, and there are separatists who want to split Xinjiang away from China. In China, under the Chinese law, anyone attempting to separate any part of Chinese territory outside of China is committing a crime. We need to be fully aware of this legal issue. We cannot tolerate anyone to do
denying
that.
Some Uyghurs have been caught up in international terrorism. No one's denying that. I'm wondering, why not lock them up? Why lock up 1 million people?
First of all, altogether in Xinjiang, there is less than 10 million Uighur people. If you are really serious in believing that there is 1 million people among the Uyghurs who are locked up in so-called camps, this is completely fabricated.
How many people are locked up?
I do not know.
Well, you can't say it's not 1 million if you don't have an alternative number.
There are several things. One is the definition of 1 million or less than 1 million, that's one thing. The other one is locked up.
Well, they're not there of their own volition, are they?
No, there are people in Xinjiang who are going through training or retraining for education purposes. There are people in
education
Xinjiang.
purposes. Kairat Samarkand, who was one of the people who managed to get out of a camp, he says that we were forced to sing political songs and study speeches of the Chinese Communist Party. We were forced to chant "Long live Xi Jinping" before we were given our meals. Many of us have tried to attempt suicide.
Allow me to say one thing for sure. No one in China is saying "Long live Xi Jinping." So whatever report you are quoting is false to start with.
Here's what I don't get, Victor. The UN, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the US State Department, various China experts, human rights activists have come up with this number of 1 million based on satellite photography, based on people who have come out and talked about it. You're saying it's not 1 million. I'm asking very simply, how many is it?
I think we need to just differentiate the realities on the ground versus the falsified claims.
So refugees, Uyghur refugees who've talked about being tortured in camps, they're just making it up according to you?
I think lots of these claims are falsified.
Wow,
That's for sure.
And you're a friend of the Uyghur people. Okay, Andreas Fulda, what do you make of Victor's response and Charles's responses so far?
I think it's, both what Charles and Victor said is indefensible, and let me explain. For a lot of people who support the Chinese Communist Party, cultural difference has to be dealt with by homogenization and assimilation. But let me give a human face to these people. There is a pop singer, he's famous for a song where he's encouraging young people to study hard, to do physical exercise and to be courteous. He is not a terrorist, Victor. Or a second example, there is another gentleman, he was very promising footballer. Because he traveled abroad, he was deemed a potential terrorist. He's in a camp. He's not a terrorist. And the last but not least, and it's really important, the peace activist Ilham Tohti, very widely respected individual, he has always advocated that the predominantly Han Chinese should get along with the Uyghurs and vice versa. He was locked up for life for this kind of moderate advocacy on behalf of his own people. So I would say these 3 individuals need to be released immediately. The 1 million Uyghurs and Kazakhs need to be released immediately. There is no justification to bring so much harm to them and their families. They should be able to live in peace and free from fear.
Victor, what's your response to that? And Charles, you wanted to come in.
Do you know how many Uighur fighters are fighting in
Definitely not 1 million,
Syria?
Victor.
5,000 people.
So why not lock up those 5,000 people?
Each Uighur fighter fighting in Syria has about 3 or 4 persons in their family fighting together.
How does 5,000 fighters go over to Syria?
Come on, Charles. Every country has had problems with fighters going out to Syria.
Okay.
France has endured far more terrorist attacks than China has.
Wait.
And French have not locked up 1 million Muslims in France.
5,000. And how did they get there? There's a support group
Same in France, Charles. And the French have not locked up 1 million people. They have a problem. The French claim they have a problem of radicalization. They've brought in a state of emergency, but they haven't detained 1 million people. But even the French haven't said, you can't name your son Mohammed. You can't have children entering mosques. Government employees can't fast during Ramadan. You can't grow, quote, abnormally long beards. That's what Beijing has banned Uighur people from doing.
That's false.
How about children not being allowed to go into mosques?
That's totally false.
Why is it false? How do you know it's false?
Because
I've seen the photos of the signs. There are photos of the
I have a neighbor, immediate next door neighbor, who is Muslim and who goes to mosque with his children.
in Beijing.
Yeah.
He's not in Xinjiang. On the one hand, you say, don't ask me, I don't know anything about this. But then you jump in to say everything's fake. Stephen, let me ask you this. You're listening to Charles and Victor saying this is propaganda. What do we know? What does the evidence suggest to you that you've seen that can be corroborated about what's happening on the ground on a place like Xinjiang?
What we do know of the political system is that the Communist Party of China has a monopoly of the truth and a monopoly of history in China. Therefore, what they say must be true, is by definition, and what anybody else has to say that does not coincide with what the party says are false news. That is what we are dealing with. When we are talking about 1/10 of an identifiable minority in the home country being identified and put in camps, how would our friends here feel if 1/10 of the native population of Shanghai or Beijing are living in camps?
Charles, do you want to answer that?
I've never thought about that question.
Okay, but he's just posed it.
I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. I don't see it possible physically to spend this inordinate amount of time on something which many, myself included, don't feel to be truthful is, I think, negative propaganda on your part, Meta.
Here's what I don't get. On the one hand, you say, I don't know anything about this. On the other hand, you say, I believe it's untruthful. You can't have it both ways, Charles. If you don't know anything about it, maybe you shouldn't accuse other people of making stuff up. And you and Victor say it's all fake news.
Maybe there is some fake news there.
Terima kasih sudah menonton. Like, share, komen, dan subscribe Anda sangat berarti bagi kami untuk menambah semangat membuat konten yang lebih bermanfaat.